Let's talk about finding, evaluating, and interpreting an inverse function for a given linear relationship. So we've been talking about quadratic relationships, but we're going to fall back to using a linear relationship for this example. So scientists have found a relationship between the temperature and the height above a distant planet's surface. T of h, given below, is the temperature in Celsius at a height of h kilometers above the planet's surface. The relationship is as follows. T of h equals 38 minus 1.25 h. In this case, what we're doing is we're inputting a height to output the temperature. So the height is what we usually call x. In this case, it is h. And T of h is a temperature, and that is what we usually call y. So complete the following statements. Let the inverse of t be the inverse function of t. Take x to be an output of the function t. That is x equals T of h, and h equals the inverse function of t. It says, which statement best describes the inverse function of t? So what you need to do is to think about before we had an input of height and an output of temperature. So in the inverse, we're going to have an input of temperature and an output of height. So in our new equation, we're going to input the temperature to find out what the height is, instead of inputting the height to find out what the temperature is. So which statement best describes this? The height above the surface in kilometers when the temperature is x. Actually, that sounds pretty good. The reciprocal of the temperature in degrees Celsius, that's just getting weird and complicated. The temperature in degrees Celsius at a height of x kilometers, that actually was our original situation. And then the ratio of temperature in degrees, again, that's just getting odd and weird. So we're going to go back to the height because that is our output above the surface in kilometers when, that means when we input a temperature or when we have a certain temperature. And they also talked about x degrees, and notice that in our inverse we have now defined our variable as x instead of h or t. We have an x. So that's how we'll decide that. Basically all we're doing is naming our original variables and then switching their places so that we can think about, instead of x and y, then we have y and x. Okay, so then the next question is, what is the inverse function of x? Here's how we find that. We start with our original. We call it y instead of T of h equals 38 minus 1 point. That's weird. Minus 1.25 h. And if you had wanted, you could put a different something instead of y, but you need to just keep track of the fact that you're going to switch what is your x with what is your y. So we have 38 minus 1.25 y. And now we're going to use some algebra to rearrange this so that y is by itself again. So I have h minus 38 equals a negative 1.25 y, and then divide by negative 1.25. So I'm kind of struggling with space here. So I have h minus 38 divided by a negative 1.25 equals y. That's my inverse function. So I can clean this up and write it like this. T inverse of x equals, now let's write x instead of this variable because we've now just sort of redefined things. X minus 38 over a negative 1.25. I think in the answer key, they're going to make it so there's not a negative 1.25 on the bottom. We're going to leave it just like that for right now. This would be the answer, x minus 38 over negative 1.25. And then we need to find the inverse of t of 25. So we have to plug in the 25. So we're going to solve this 25 minus 38 divided by negative 1.25. You can use a calculator for that. Minus 38 equals, and now I'm going to hit divided by negative 1.25, enter, and I get 10.4. All right, if you would remember this, we're going to go look at the answer that they give. I think they're just going to rearrange things just a bit with the negative, and I don't think they would actually count it wrong if you left it the way it is. They have an explanation here. It's good. Right there is the answer that we wrote on ours. And then right here is how they rearrange this so that there's not a minus. Notice that they switched around. And multiplied by a negative. Find that just a bit confusing, but actually all they did is move that negative out to the side. They didn't actually really redo anything, they just moved that negative out to the side. And then let's make sure that they got the same answer, which they did, just like that.